Not asking too much.
Okay. Good evening.
Hi, how are
Good
you?
evening. Where's Asher? He didn't come?
He's coming.
Oh, he's coming.
He's talking to his daughter.
Okay. It's over here. So you passed all the copies? Let me just get one more copy. Everyone got a copy?
Yes.
You're in charge. Everyone else walks in. Okay, good evening. Let's see who's watching. If you're watching, please say hi. So you're trying to say hi. Ravit says hi. Hello, Ravit. Good evening to you. And let's see who's watching on Chabad.org on this wonderful evening. Your phone's not working?
Not in here, no.
Oh, you know, sure is. Okay.
There's no problem.
Waiting for someone to say hi on Chabad.org. Good evening, everyone that's here in person. Rick, you get a special, I want to make a special shout out to Rick because he's here all by himself. So till now, I always get thought it's, Esther is schlepping you. Now you've really proved your independence. Stephanie, good evening. Toda, I'm glad you're watching. Still don't see any comments on Chabad.org, so I don't know what's going on over here. If you're watching on Chabad.org, Art is watching. Art Shuotov. Now we can start. And good evening, Sarah, friend. Okay. So tonight's class is going to be quite interesting. It is, as always, in the memory of Yitzchak Tzvi ben Yosef, whose Yartet is coming soon. This should have an elevation. And I'll start with a joke about this guy who is sitting. Let's start again. There's a man on his deathbed. He's surrounded by his family, and he looks around and he opens his eyes as he's almost dead, and he sees every one of his close family members around. He sees every one of his close family members around the bed. Turns to his oldest, says, Chaim, you here? Chaim says, yes, Dad, I'm here. Turns to his next son, says, David, you here? He says, yes, my son, I'm here. Says, Denise, you're here? Yes. Fred, you're here? He goes to each and every child, everyone's there. So finally he goes through everyone and says, I don't understand. If everyone's here, who's watching the store? Who's watching the store? So it's a good evening from a very cold and very snowy Pennsylvania. So Jews, somehow we like to worry about the future, right? You're on your deathbed and you're worried about the story, you're worried about who's taking over, there's another joke about the guy giving out the different routes, but whatever. One joke is enough for now. And so in this week's Torah reading, we find Jacob on his deathbed, right? And Jacob gathered and opens his eyes, and he sees all of his kids are gathered around his bed. Reuven, and Shimon, and Levi, and Yehuda, and Yisachar, and Zevulun, and Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, and Yosef, and Yamin, they're all there. Everyone's there, the grandkids. The ganze Mishpacha came. And the real beauty, the real greatness of why Yaakov is the ultimate father, the ultimate paragon and icon of what a Jewish father should be, is because Yaakov was able to understand the unique nature and the unique need and the unique personality of each one of his children, and to be able to bless them according to the blessing that they needed to hear. So for some, that was a blessing. For some, it looked like a rebuke. For some, it looked like a prophecy, or it looked like random poetic words that didn't really have much meaning. And in fact, as we're going to see, was actually a prophecy giving encouragement for the future. This is the greatness of Yaakov, able to connect to each one of his children before his death and give them the words that they need to hear. So I want to focus on one of the most abstract, interesting of the blessings. And really what we're going to talk about is how this is a prophecy for Samson, for Shimshon. And it happened, you've heard of Shimshon, right? Everyone's heard of Shimshon. But none of you, I'm sure, know all the details of the story of Shimshon. Robert has heard us learning about it in the morning, because in the morning now I'm learning through Tanakh. Fascinating. And I've been really thinking about this character for the last 2 weeks or so. Really thinking about it. So much of what I'm going to say, only Robert has heard. He'll forgive me. And there'll be some things that I did not say in the morning. I've only learned as I was preparing for the class and going deeper. So let's start at the beginning. And it's connected to this week's Torah reading, because in this week's Torah reading, Yaakov feels the need before he passes away to talk about Shimshon, Samson the mighty. Shimshon comes from the tribe of Dan. Dan is not from the illustrious, important tribes of Israel, so to say. Everyone's important, but some have more prestige in the ranking, the social ranking of the Jewish people. Dan is not considered one of those important tribes, kind of like, the back of the line. And yet, Dan gets one of the longest blessings. Besides for Yehuda, who will be the king, and Yosef, the longest blessing, 3 verses, goes to the tribe of Dan. What does Jacob say to Dan? If you look in your text, if you're watching my personal page, you'll see the text. If you're watching at home, you can open up the book of the Torah, chapter 49 of Genesis. Why isn't this? 1 second, I have to open it back up. With the momentum, my dear friends. So here we go, chapter 49. Make it drop smaller. Verse 16. Here is the blessing that God gives to the he gives to the tribe of Dan. Dan Yadin Amo. Dan will avenge his people like the tribes of Israel. Okay? One day, Dan will judge his people or avenge his people like one of the tribes of Israel. Verse 17, Dan will be a serpent on the road, a viper on the path, which bites the horse's heels, so its rider falls backwards. That's the blessing. Imagine, God forbid, your father's deathbed. And this is his final blessing to you, my son. You'll be like a snake on the road. Oh, thanks, Dad. You'll be like a viper on the path. You will be able to bite the horse's heels, so its rider falls backwards. That's a great blessing to get from your father before he dies, no? Yeah. That's the blessing of Dan, to be a snake who will bite the horse, and when he bites the horse jumps in the air, and when he does that, the rider falls off, and the horse and the rider both die. And then the next verse is even more interesting. What's the next verse? Seemingly, it's not a blessing. It's not a prophecy. It's not a curse. Shalom Asher. Give it to the paper over there. Yaakov says, Lishu ascha kivisi Hashem, for your salvation, I hope, O Lord. Now, how is that part of the blessing that Jacob is giving? There's no other tribe that gets a blessing in the middle, like a prayer, in the middle of their blessing. Only the tribe of Dan gets a prayer in the middle of their blessing. So Rashi tells us, and just a part of the Rashi, if we look at the Rashi, when it says that Dan will avenge his people, it means he will avenge his people from the Plishtim. Who are the Plishtim? They live in Gaza, our favorite place. Yeah. Nothing changes. Although the Palestinians have nothing to do with Plishtim, it's just, let's not get distracted, but it's nothing to do with each other. Like the tribes of Israel, see all the formatting got lost. Like the tribes of Israel, all Israel will be like one with him, and he will avenge them all. Who is the person about which it is written that he will be the one to avenge all of Israel from their enemies? This is Shimshon concerning Samson. Jacob says this prophecy. So we describe the greatness of the tribe of Dan, how they will have a snake biting its rider. They'll be like one of the nations, like Yehuda, like one of the important tribes. They will be the one to save the Jewish people. The time in history when this will be at the time of Shimshon. A viper, which bites the horse's heels, so is the habit of a snake. How does a snake, I'll say it outside, how does a snake kill the rider? He doesn't touch the rider. You know what the snake does? He bites the horse, and the horse throws the rider, and the rider lands on his kepi, he lands on his head, and he gets a boo-boo and he dies. So to who remembers, how did Shimshon, sorry for Robert, that'll be cheating. How did Shimshon kill many, many, many thousands of Plishtim? Yeah, that's right. He didn't touch them. He pushed out most of the Plishtim that he killed during his lifetime. He killed hand-to-hand combat. He literally tore them apart with his hands, or with the jawbone of a donkey. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But the ultimate killing of Plishtim, which in fact the Torah says at that moment of his death, he killed more Plishtim than he killed in his entire lifetime, happened without touching a single person. he just pushed out the walls. One second, he pushed out the walls. When he pushed out the walls, it says there was 3,000 people on the roof. The roof had 3,000 people. And one commentary says that wasn't 3,000 on the roof. It was 3,000 on the edge of the roof that could see the spectacle of Shimshon being tortured and being, mocked and humiliated in the public setting. There are many more thousand that were at the bar, or that they didn't even see. 3,000 were watching from the roof, and there were many, many, many more thousands in the main building. We don't even know how many, it doesn't say, but more than he killed in his entire lifetime. And he didn't just kill people, he killed all the who's who of the Plishtim. Who was at the party? The machers, the knackers, right? The governors. So all these people, they were all killed in one shot. And for 20 years after his death, they would still be afraid of Shimshon from the damage he did on that one night when he pushed out the walls. So this is how Rashi explains to us the prophecy of Jacob before he dies, how Shimshon will grasp these pillars, and that those on the roof and everyone on the inside will fall down, everyone on the inside would all die. And then we have the prayer of Jacob. How does Jacob pray? Laila Tovaydi Simcha. How does Jacob pray? It says, Lishu Ascha Kivisi Hashem, for your salvation, I hope, O Lord. And Jacob at that moment saw the Plishtim would gouge out the eyes of Shimshon, of Samson. And this part of the story is famous. They'll poke at his eyes, and we'll talk soon about why they did that. God willing, if I get to it. I'm afraid I won't finish everything in one night, but they poked at his eyes, and at that moment, he will pray to God. Beautiful words. You pray to God and you say, God, please, Zachreinina, remember me, Chaskeinina, strengthen me, Achapam Hazeh, this one last time, and I'll give thanks to Hashem. And at that moment, God will give him the strength to be able to avenge the Plishtim. And therefore, Jacob was already praying. This is 550 years before Shimshon. 550 years before Shimshon, Jacob was already praying for the day that one of the descendants of Dan will be standing there in the time of distress. He'll be praying to God, God, once again, give me my strength back. At that moment, God will answer his prayer. Why? Because already Jacob was praying for him now on his deathbed. He saw what would happen. There's a beautiful, beautiful, scary, amazing medrash. It says, you know why he was praying? Jacob wanted to tell his children the end of days. Jacob wanted to tell his children about the times of Mashiach. In fact, that's why, if you remember, in the beginning of all the children gathering around the deathbed of Jacob, there was a spirit of prophecy resting upon Jacob. He wanted to reveal to his children when would be the end of days, when Mashiach would come. At that moment, the spirit of divine prophecy left him. And he got very afraid. He thought that obviously one of his children or some of his children had sinned and were not as morally righteous as they pretended to be. And therefore, God was taking away the power of prophecy to tell his children about the future. And then the children say to him, no, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. We only have one God, we're loyal, and not just as Baruch Shem. But that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to reveal to them the end of days. It says in Medrash that he was in the middle of telling his children the prophecies of each one of his tribes. And he comes to Dan, and he sees Samson. At that moment, he thought, oh, that's going to be the Mashiach. That will be the end of the suffering of the Jewish people when our leader will arrive, when Shimshon will arise to be the one to uplift the Jewish people, to destroy the people in Gaza, destroy our enemies, and to save us. And then Jacob sees a little bit further, and what does he see? He sees Shimshon with his eyes gouged out and being tortured and humiliated and mocked in public. And he sees he's not going to be the Mashiach. At that moment, Jacob prays, Hashem, for your salvation. I hope, O Lord, a prayer for the Jewish people. That after such a loss, we should still be able to go on and still be able to continue staying loyal and able to overcome the many new enemies that would arise after the death of Shimshon. Okay, so that's the prayer that Jacob is praying before he dies. God, for your salvation, I hope. I see the Jewish people are going to lose a potential Mashiach. Shimshon, who will be the Holy One of God, is not going to save them. God, I'm looking to you, you save them. Now, I want to tell you, before I get to the details of the story of Shimshon, which are fascinating, I want to explain to you that being compared to a snake is not a bad thing. Or rather, it it's unique. Why is Shimshon being compared to a snake? So we gave the example, like the snake bites the horse, and the horse jumps up and the rider falls. So in the prophecy of Jacob about Shimshon, he's describing how Shimshon would kill so many people without touching them directly. But what's unique about a snake? So first of all, the power of a snake is not in its body. Where is the power of a snake? In its head. Its head, fangs. Most animals have big claws, teeth, whatever. Saying snake, the rest of the body is nothing. All it is a head, really. There's nothing else. Where was the power of Shimshon? His hair. As we're going to talk about Delilah, and we're going to talk about that. But something even more interesting. Animals generally go in pairs, in groups, in packs, in herds. Animals, generally speaking, hang out together. Right? If you see, I don't know, pick an animal, there's going to be another one nearby. If you see a mouse, you see a rat, there's another rat somewhere nearby. That rat didn't come in by itself, right? Every animal, look at the difference. Cats, everything. Animals live together. The only animal that goes on its own is the snake. The snake attacks by itself. Other animals attack in herds, in packs. Every single leader of the Jewish people, think about this, very interesting. Every single leader of the Jewish people, how do they defend the Jewish people? They gathered an army and they went to fight our enemies. Some had bigger armies, some had smaller armies. Gideon, middle class of him, had 300 people in his army. But they all had armies. They all were leaders by consensus. They gathered people together. Shimshon, we're going to learn soon, was exceedingly humble. He never once took any kind of greatness upon himself. He never once considered himself like the leader of the Jewish people. He was a leader. He was a judge. And everyone came to him for advice and for wisdom, but he never carried himself that way. In fact, the Gemara says that when he prayed to God to save his life at the end, not to save his life, to give him his strength back, he said, God, not once in 20 years that I was a judge did I ask anyone to carry anything for me. Normally, you're the rabbi. You say, do me a favor, do this. He was a judge of the Jewish people. He never once asked anyone to do him a favor. He was very humble. And in fact, I'm going to soon tell you some stories about Shimshon. I'll already say it to you now, so when you hear the stories, you'll understand the perspective of the commentaries. When Shimshon went to these cities and was engaged with girls or the plishtim and all that, who converted according to many of the commentaries, but he made sure to always frame his actions where he killed the plishtim as a personal vendetta. I'm going to show this to you in the story, but I'm telling you already now so you'll see it. Shimshon never once fought a war on behalf of the Jewish people. You know why? Because he knew that if he would fight on behalf of the Jewish people, what would the plishtim do? Take revenge against the Jewish people. Now, they couldn't take revenge against Shimshon directly because he was too strong for them. So what would they do? They would terrorize the Jews. And then the Jews would put political pressure. They say, please stop. They would have an excuse to go and kill innocent Jews. So Shimshon, like a snake, fought and defended the Jewish people single-handedly. And when I say single-handedly, I mean literally single-handedly. He never once had a helper. He never once had an army. He never once had a court. He never once had helpers. In fact, he made sure that no one should ever say, look at this man fighting for the Jews. He was willing to besmirch his name and to do things that were less than reputable in order to allow the Plishtim people to think that Samson is this renegade, dangerous man, and not that he's a representative of the Jewish people. It's a whole new perspective. When you're going to read the stories now, and you have this perspective in mind, first of all, you understand the prophecy of Jacob. He's comparing Shimshon to a snake on the path. A snake on the path, they sneak by themselves. They hide where they're going. They hide where they're coming from. Number one. And number two, they're alone. They don't need a backup. They don't need a herd. They fight alone. Shimshon hid where he was coming from. He hid his origins and his objectives, and he never once wanted to endanger another Jew. He took it all upon himself. Okay. You guys ready to hear about the story of Shimshon? So we're going to go through it. I'm going to give you the interesting parts, the parts that are not so well known. Some of the more rated R parts, maybe we'll, Marsha's not here tonight, so. And then, of course, the ending of the class will be the most important part. What's going to be the ending? How we, in our lives, can be like Shimshon. Our last week, we talked about how we can be Maccabees. This week, we'll talk about how we can be Shimshon, even if we're not giants, and even if we're not given supernatural superpowers, and we're not Superman, or who are the other cool superpowers? I don't know, Spider-Man or Batman, I don't know. They can jump off of buildings and save, people in the subways, as today even police officers don't. I'm saying, well, so we don't have superpowers to be like Shimshon, to jump off the building and save the poor woman being burnt alive. But any one of us can be like Shimshon if we understand what was the secret of Shimshon. And we'll get there. And that's, God willing, what we'll end tonight's discussion with, how we all can be like Shimshon. So, my friends, let us begin. Shalom, everyone that's watching. Shalom, Sean from Oklahoma City. And hello, Early. And hello, Joe. We say hello, Carmen. Good evening, everyone. Okay. And it says about 550 years after Moses, after Jacob, the Jews are living in Israel. It's a tough time for the Jews. The Plishtim are living in what's today Gaza, on the coastal areas, very wealthy, beautiful lands. The Jews have never really conquered these lands from the Plishtim. And part of why they're living there in peace is because Abraham had made a peace treaty with Avimelech. Do you remember that story? Avimelech is the king of the Plishtim. And he sees how Abraham is becoming very, very successful. And so Avimelech comes to Abraham and says, let's make a peace treaty. And in fact, the first Abraham Accords, that's where it comes from. Abraham Accords comes from the Bible, was the peace treaty between Abraham and Avimelech, the king of the Plishtim. And this is part of why, even though it ended after 7 generations and the Jews came back by Joshua, was already after the peace treaty had expired, so to say, was part of why the Jews never pushed them out of their land completely, and the Plishtim always remained there. Even when Joshua conquered the land, the Plishtim were never chased out. The Plishtim have now taken over control over much of the land of Israel, and they rule with an iron fist. They're ruthless. We see they're very immoral. They're also very dishonest and cunning. There's no loyalty whatsoever with the Plishtim. And they're dangerous. They're very, very dangerous. At that time, there was a man called Menelaus and his wife. Now, the Tanakh does not tell us the name of his wife. However, we do know the name of his wife. His name was Tlephanes. Okay? You didn't know that in the morning, because I didn't know that either. Her name is Tlephanes. Okay, now you know. Tlephanes. Now, by the way, Tlephanes is actually considered much holier than Menelaus. For all the women here, Tlephanes sees the angel. Her husband, Menelaus, does not see the angel. And the angel appears to Tlephanes one day while she's out in the field, not with her husband. And what does the angel say to Tlephanes? He says, my dear, that's my dear. He says, hello, dear woman, you are going to have a baby. You will not be barren, you will have a baby. However, he says to her in Judges, chapter 13, verse number 4, beware now. Consequently, beware now, and do not drink wine or any sheikh, any intoxicating drink. Do not eat any unclean thing, anything which is ritually impure, because you shall conceive and bear a son, and the razor shall not come upon his head. For a Nazarite to God shall the lad be from the womb, and he will begin to save Israel from the hand of the Philistines, the Plishtim. So she gets a clear prophecy from an angel. She doesn't know it's an angel at the time. She just thinks it's a prophet of God. Later she'll discover it's an angel who says to her, you're going to have a child, but it's not going to be a regular child. This is going to be a child who will be the savior of the Jewish people. And therefore, already from the moment you conceive, a mother, when she eats during pregnancy, that food, the wine she drinks, if she drinks alcohol, will have a direct impact on the child. And we actually see this right over here in the Tanakh, where the angel says, the child will be a Nazir, do not drink wine, etc. Keep him holy and pure. She went back to her husband and says, you won't believe it, I saw a prophet, I saw a man of God, he told me I'm going to have a child, and this child's going to be a Nazir. So no eating, and he'll save the Jewish people. And by the way, if you think about it for a second, that makes no sense. Do you know what the laws of a Nazir? There's 3 conditions to be a Nazirite. What are the laws of a Nazirite? A Nazir has 3 main conditions. Number 1,
You don't cut your hair.
don't cut your hair.
Don't drink wine.
Don't drink wine.
And no relations, right?
No, you can get married.
Okay.
Anyone know? No coming in contact with a dead body. No ritual impurity. A Nazir can't go to a cemetery. They can't go to a funeral. If you're going to be the savior of Israel, killing the Pelishtim, guess what? You're going to be coming into contact with a lot of dead bodies. Shimshon killed with his bare hands many people. He absolutely came into ritual impurity multiple times over. So Menelaus doesn't believe this whole story. He's not convinced. He says, you're telling me we're going to have a child to be a Nazir. He can't have wine. He won't be able to cut his hair. She adds to it, by the way. I'm not going to get into the details. The angel said just not to cut his hair. She said until the day he dies. She added to it. He felt like she was adding. But he'll be a savior fighting for the Jewish people, but he'll be a Nazir. How could a Nazirite be a general leading an army, fighting wars? You know, that doesn't make any sense. You're fighting wars. You're going to come into contact with dead bodies. So he didn't believe her. Can you imagine a husband doesn't believe his wife? Terrible. Never happened. Never happened.
Who said that?
No one said that. There was a story once upon a time, many years ago, in a faraway land. There was a husband who didn't believe his wife. Yeah, it could have been Jewish. It was many years ago in a faraway land. Anyway, what happens? So he prays, says, God, if an angel came, let me see, come again. And guess what happens? The angel comes again. But only to Sophinus. The angel wanted to send the message. You're like, she's the one, not you. She's the one. There was actually a whole debate, and the commentators say there was a whole debate between Sophinus and Menelaus, who was responsible for the fact that they had no kids. Was she barren? Was he barren? So the angel's coming to her anyway. But let's not, I don't want to get distracted in this part of the story because I have so many good things to still share with you. So the angel comes again, and she says, please, stay right here. Let me go call my husband because he's not going to believe me. He's not going to believe me. So she runs to get her husband. Her husband follows after her. She's leading. Again, you see clearly I love when people think that Judaism is chauvinistic to the males. If you know how to study Tanakh, you see like one of these stories where it's clear, the Torah describes clearly how she's leading him to the angel. That's why I'm saying this tonight when Esther is not here, so you're fine. You don't tell her this part. You can tell her that the man's always in charge, you know. What? Yeah, you wouldn't dare. I saw a joke about this guy that says, I prayed to God, I prayed that I should have a wife who will submit to her husband. I got what I prayed for. I got a wife who submits me all of her credit card bills and her Kohl's receipts and her Macy's receipts. She submits them all to me. Next time was more specific what I pray for. Anyway, so the point is, he follows after her. We're getting distracted. The angel says to them, yes, you're going to have a child, and yes, he should be a Nazirite, and he should not touch his hair, he shouldn't drink wine. And then Menelaus still is not convinced that this is actually an angel. He thinks he's a man of God, a prophet. He says, please come, let me give you food, let me make a meal for you. He says, I don't eat food, don't waste your time. If you want, make an altar, take your little goat that you want to slaughter and offers an offering to Hashem. They take a rock, they slaughter the animal. He brings a fire, and then into the flames of the fire, they see this man ascend up to heavens in the flame of the fire. At that moment, they both realized that what they saw was actually an angel, because they saw what looked like a man going up in the flames to heaven. They fall on their faces. Manoah thinks he's going to die. His wise wife says, you're not going to die. Why will God show you an angel, then kill you afterwards? Like, that doesn't make any sense. God gave us a mission to raise a child, and sure enough, she becomes pregnant, and they give birth to what is going to be one of the most holy children of the Jewish people, a man that will have a tremendous job to protect the Jewish people from the terrorists that are giving us a hard time. Okay. Now, Shimshon is born. From the day he's born, he's a Nazirite. His mother is exceedingly careful to make sure he's raised in holiness and purity, to have no distractions from his job to be holy. Now, even though she knows he'll be the savior of the Jewish people, he's not raised to be mighty and strong. See, I want to interrupt myself. Most people, if you don't watch tonight's discussion, will tell you that Shimshon was a brute man, something like a Shrek or something, not too smart, not too great, not too holy, not too religious or spiritual. He was a man that liked women, but he was very strong. He killed a lot of people. That is the typical understanding of Shimshon. Which is like, so he's kind of like Goliath. You have Goliath, who was a big giant of a man, who was ferocious and fearless, and struck fear into those of his enemies. And on the Jewish side, you have another Goliath-like figure whose name is Samson. But if you read the story in Tanakh, that's not how the story reads. There is not one single word, and I've read through all the chapters inside. There's not ever once even a hint of criticism to Shimshon. In the Talmud there is, but even that is limited. And multiple times the Torah tells us how God protected Shimshon, how God was with Shimshon, and everything that Shimshon did was part of the plan of God. Doesn't mean that Shimshon didn't make mistakes. I'm not saying that. He did. But Shimshon was a holy person given a unique mission by God to invoke fear into the enemies of the Jewish people. Because of his humility and because of his desire to protect Jewish people by taking all the blame for his act upon himself and deflecting from the Jewish people, the Plishtim should never take revenge against the Jews for what he did, the story comes out in a very strange way. But it's all part of God's master plan. Why do I tell you that? Because if you look in chapter 14, verse number 4, which is the last verse on the first page, don't turn over the page yet. It's from the next chapter. I didn't put the chapters in, I wanted to fit into 2 pages. So he's a young lad. His parents are raising him in as much holiness and spirituality as they possibly could. And then what happens? The lad goes down to Timnah. And he goes to Timnah, and what happens in Timnah? He meets a girl who wants to get married to her. Now, you can imagine the parents are not too excited about this. They don't want to marry. Now, is she Jewish? Is an excellent question. According to the Rambam, she was Jewish, she converted. The Radak writes, Chalila, God forbid to say that she wasn't Jewish and she didn't convert. She converted, but she was still a Plishti girl. She wasn't from an illustrious family. He was young. And so he sees this girl, he goes to marry her. And says the verse, listen to this verse. It's a fascinating verse. Verse 4 of chapter 14. Now his father and mother did not know that it was from the Lord that he sought a pretense against the Philistines. Now, at that time, the Philistines were ruling over Israel. You understand what this verse is saying? Everything I just said to you, I didn't make it up. It's actually black and white in the verse. Once you know what I told you, now you can see it in the story. Now you can see it in the story. The Torah is saying clearly, God put it into the heart of Shimshon to go down to Timnah. The Plishtim are oppressing the Jewish people, and he wants to defend them. So what's he going to do? Go say, I'm the savior of the Jewish people? First of all, he was too humble. He didn't even on his own appreciate his strength. But secondly, he sought a pretense against the Philistines. It's here in the text. He was seeking a pretense against them, to find a way to make it a personal vendetta against the Plishtim. So he went down looking for a way to make trouble. Now the story is going to make a lot more sense. And I'm telling you, I studied the story the last few weeks and I didn't know this, what the commentaries say. Now that I know this, the story makes much more sense. Verse number 5, turn the page over. So Samson and his father and mother went down to Timnah, and they come to the vineyards outside the city of Timnah. There's vineyards. Now, can Shimshon go through the vineyards? No, he's avoiding wine. So he goes around a long detour. His parents go straight to the vineyards. And behold, a young lion roared towards him. And there, at that moment, rested on him a spirit of the Lord. What I'm about to tell you happens next is not just an interesting coincidence. This is the spirit of the Lord resting upon him. It's a divine moment. The beginning of a divine career of avenging the Plishtim for terrorizing the Jews. And he rent this animal, he tore it apart as one would rent a kid. Not like renting a kid today. I don't know, you rent a kid. Today, if you rent a kid, that doesn't sound too good, by the way. Doesn't sound too good at all. But rent like to tear apart a goat. Language has changed over the years. although he had nothing in his hand. He did not tell his father and mother what he had done. So this is very interesting. This is actually a fascinating story. I want to make sure you understand what happened. His parents going through the vineyard, going to Timnah. He can't go down the road through the vineyard because he's going to be in contact with the grape, with vines. So he takes a long detour. All of a sudden, a lion comes out of nowhere. Who sees lions in vineyards coming out of out of nowhere? A young lion comes running towards him. And normally lions don't charge you in the middle of the day, like if you don't attack them. But he sees it. Instead of hiding, a spirit of the Lord comes upon him. He tears the lion into pieces. He grabs the lion, just tears it apart. Tears it open. Didn't kill it. He tore it apart. It's going to be important. He didn't tell his parents what happened because he knew that there was something special and unique about this moment. What happens? He gets engaged to this girl. He goes back home. Now, in those days, he didn't get married right away. So he goes back to his family. And a year later, he returns to take his wife to be married. And on the way back to Tim the second time, this time for the wedding, he passes again the same detour. And what does he see on the side of the road? The dead lion that he had torn apart a year earlier, the carcass, the bones, the skeleton is there. And in the skeleton or the carcass of the dead animal is now a hive of bees. They built, if you ever saw, anyone here ever saw honeycombs? They build it like in a structure, right? Like in your roofs. So here they did it in the bones of the animal, of the lion. And there's a honeycomb there. He sees the bees and the honey inside the lion. He takes with his hands, he scoops out the honey, squeezes from the honeycombs, he squeezes out the honey, comes, he eats some of it. He carries the honey to his parents who are waiting for him in Timnah and gives them the honey. And as the verse says, he does not tell his parents where the honey came from. But he knows. The fact that Torah is telling us so many details about this lion and the honey is he knows this is something special. And you know what happens? He comes to the wedding party, and there's these 30 young men that are his accompaniment, his friends. Now, he's not friends with the police. Let's clarify this. He has actually come with the intent of making trouble and avenging the Plishtim for what they're doing to the Jews. So he has these 30 friends of his wife that are now officially his grooms of, what's it called, grooms of honor? The groommates, the whatever. So he says, let's play a game. Let's have a deal. I'm going to ask you a riddle. If you answer the riddle, I will give each one of you a change of clothing and a new sheet. I'll give you clothing and sheets. Sounds pretty good. Today, you go to the guy, I'll give you clothing and sheets. And if you lose, then you all have to give me a change of clothing and suits and sheets. 30 men, I'll give you each one, or you all give me one, which will be 30 for him. What's the riddle? He says to them, tell me, out of the eater came food to eat, and out of the mighty came sweetness. Yes, that's the riddle. Out of the eater came food, and out of the strong came sweetness. I have 7 days of the party to figure this out. 7 days of party. This is about the wedding. So they start going crazy, and they're trying to figure out, and they can't figure it out. So what do? They come to his new wife, and they say to his new wife, you better tell us the answer to the riddle. Did you bring us to this feast to make us poor? We came to the wedding to have a good time, and now what are you doing to us? You're making us poor, but making us pay each one of us a new suit, the new set of bed sheets to this stranger. If you don't tell us the answer to the riddle, we're going to burn you and your family. These people were ruthless. And you're going to see that they eventually do kill her. They burn her alive. Her and her father and her family are all burnt alive. We'll soon see how. So this was not an empty threat. They would rather kill someone than burn someone than have to lose a bet and pay a suit and sheets per person. So she's desperate. She starts crying to her husband. Don't you love me? I said like fifth level. Don't you love me? Don't you care about me? Tell me the answer. So he says to his wife, I didn't even tell my parents the answer. Why would I tell you? I didn't tell my own mother. That's great. That's a good thing to tell your wife. Your mother-in-law doesn't know. Sounds like a Jewish marriage. So,
That's his
So-
problem. He didn't tell his mother.
he didn't tell his mother or his mother-in-law. He didn't tell his mother-in-law. Who tells her mother-in-law anything? I'm saying, you just tell your mother-in-law it's nice seeing you. No, I'm just joking.
He said to Torah, you better listen to your mother-in-law.
Yeah. So he didn't tell his own mother. He tells his wife, as if that should make her feel better that he didn't tell his mother. Yeah, sure. So she keeps on begging and crying, and she's crying because she feels offended and because she's scared of what the police will do to her. And it's finally before sunset on the seventh day, and she finally gets to her new husband, says, tell me, please, where's the love? Tell me before you tell everyone else. So he tells her. What does she do immediately? She runs to tell them.
Make him gefilte fish.
Gefilte fish. She tells them. They come to him now, it's right before sunset of the seventh day. They say to him, they answer the riddle with a riddle, and they say, what is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion? Meaning, by the way, I don't want to get too technical into the words of their answer. The commentators explain very beautifully. They kind of didn't admit it without admitting that they didn't know the answer. They got it from his wife. How would they know the answer? Let's do it for 1 minute. Let's spend 1 minute on this. If they would have figured out the answer on their own, how would they have figured out the answer? They would have traveled around town. He actually said to them, the words he says to them, if you can find what is sweeter than honey. And they would have said, we found a lion. It was outside of the city. It wasn't like a made-up thing. There was actually a lion right outside the city with honey inside it. They would have traveled. They would have seen it. They wouldn't know the answer. They didn't say we found the lion with the honey. So how do you know that out of the eater comes food is honey and the lion? You can only know that the honey and the lion is if someone told you that. So they don't want to say honey and a lion because then it's obvious someone told them. So instead they gave us like roundabout like poetic answer to try and say we know the answer without saying how they know the answer. You understand what I'm saying? If you follow that logic, good. If not, it's okay. Point is, they say they avoid saying how they know. But Shimshon is no idiot. He in a second understands the only way they know is from his wife. So he says to them, if you hadn't plowed with my cow, you wouldn't know the answer. And he has to go get them the suits. What does he do? He goes down to the city of Ashkelon, which is a major Gaza city on the port, kills 30 men with his bare hands, takes their clothing with their names on it, and goes to the 30 men at the party, says, here's your clothing, here's your sheets that I stole from those 30 dead men over there. And he's furious, and he leaves his wife behind in Timnah and goes back all by himself. So he's killed 30 people, he's made a mark, and everyone in town is talking about the fact that Shimshon has been deeply offended by his wife betraying his trust at his wedding. Again, let's think of the story now from the perspective that I gave you. If Shimshon's objective is to act on behalf of God, to create a diversion from the Jewish people, that they shouldn't know, that the Plishtim shouldn't know that he's acting on behalf of the Jews, but they should think that it's only about him alone, he has done the most excellent job you could possibly do of creating the most dramatic, the most, needed in the mikvah. I think they're schmoozing by the glove house and the golf course and whatever. Everyone's talking about the story of Shimshon and his wife and the 7 and the riddle and the 30 men he killed. Everyone knows about it. So he's done an excellent job of setting the scene for 1 year later. 1 year later, it's in the middle of the springtime, the harvest time, and all the grain is ripened, and they're all harvesting their grain. It's still in the field with the harvesting. And Shimshon comes back to marry his wife, to take back his wife that he never divorced. She's his wife. He married her. He left her, but she still married him. And guess what had happened during that year? She had been not faithful to him. A woman that could betray her husband during the Shabbat Brachos, like you hear stories, like on the night of during the honeymoon, something that the guy was cheating, like crazy stories like that, like something like that doesn't make any sense. So if you can betray your spouse, so 7 days from your wedding, you're not a very loyal person. That's for sure.
I knew a friend like this.
Yeah, there's people. I heard a whole story once, something like this. That like by the wedding, they have the wedding, only like the bridesmaids or whatever,
But Rabbi, when this Samson got married, if he would have been, he was killed, right?
That's later. You're jumping to the end of the story.
You know, because he was killed with all the Philistines.
Yeah, but that's later. I started the story from the beginning. I told you about how he got killed because that was a prophecy. But now we're towards the beginning of the story still. So it comes back a year later. You know his wife, you know what happened? She was unfaithful to him. She was with another man. So her father married her to another man. She's now married to two men. No problem. Again, the Plishtim were a disgusting society morally. You'll see a few different examples of this where morally they had no values. So Shimshon, so what does the father do? The father says to Shimshon, what's the big deal? She has a younger sister who's prettier than her. What do you need her for? Take the younger sister. I'll give you the younger sister as a wife instead. Again, you understand what kind of people we're dealing with? I married off your wife to someone else. Big deal. I have a younger daughter. Take the younger daughter. She's prettier.
What a good father.
Great father. It's a culture. It's a culture. Because this was all done publicly. There was a wedding. It wasn't like she started unfaithful, and then he formally married her to another man. He knew that. Shimshon probably knew that, which is probably why he did this. So Shimshon gets very upset, says, you're embarrassing me. You're humiliating me. Marrying my wife, she's married to me, and now you're marrying her to a different person. This is embarrassing. So what does Shimshon do? What does he do? He goes and he gets 30 shu'alim. Either it's a fox or a jackal, which go in herds. So jackals go in herds. It's easy to capture a lot of them at once. Or the typical translation is foxes. Whatever it is, he captures 300 living foxes, or jackals. And he ties the tail of each two together. So now you have 150 pairs of foxes with the tails tied together. He then ties a burning torch. He hangs a burning torch on the tied tails of these foxes and lets them free, lets them go. Now you can imagine the panic of these foxes. They're tied together and there's a fire on them, behind them, hanging from them, not on them because then they would just die. So there's a fire hanging between the two tails. He did it in a way that was hanging from the tails so that the foxes didn't catch on fire, but the fire was burning. And when the foxes go crazy, they start running and running and running. 150 different pairs of foxes running everywhere, and they destroy all of the harvest. For years and years and years, the Plishtim had terrorized the Jews and stolen all the harvest of the Jewish people for years. This year, Shimshon found a way to get revenge, seemingly for the personal insult against him for his father-in-law marrying his wife to another man and offering the younger daughter instead. And the entire countryside, the entire region, not only was all the field of wheat that had just harvested all burnt, the fires were so bad, the foxes were running around in so many circles and running so much, even the olive groves, the olive trees burnt down. To burn down the olive tree means it's a big fire. To burn down wheat is a small fire, but when olive trees are big fires. And at first the Plishtim couldn't figure out who did this. There were so many fires in so many places they couldn't figure out what was going on. Eventually they found out there was 150 different foxes, pairs of foxes, and they kept them running because the fire was not on their tails. It was hanging from their tails. And they realized it's Shimshon. So now they're very, very upset at Shimshon. They know what it is. So what did the Plishtim do? They want to get revenge. But can they get revenge against Shimshon? No, they're scared of him. So what do? They go, they say, why is Shimshon upset? Oh, because his father-in-law married his wife to a different woman. It's a different man. So what do the Plishtim do? They go to the house of his wife and his father-in-law, and they burn down the house with his wife and his father-in-law inside.
What a nice family.
Very nice. Nice people. Nice neighbors. You understand that? They need to get revenge. They need to show we're going to get revenge. So how do they get revenge? By burning down the house of Shimshon's father-in-law and his wife. Either they thought that they're getting revenge, or other commentaries say they thought they were going to try and placate Shimshon by saying, look, you're angry because he married his wife, your wife to someone else, we'll kill her for you. But by the way, you see how well Shimshon does at convincing the Plishtim that this is a personal vendetta, that they're trying to, how are they reacting to him destroying the entire harvest of the entire land of the Plishtim? by burning down the house and killing his wife and his wife's family. But now Shimshon says, you idiots, you killed my wife, now I'm going to kill you guys. Till now you only embarrassed me, so I only financially hurt you. Now that you killed my wife, again, it's a wife who's never living with, but it was an excuse. You killed my wife, and I was in love with her, is what he says. Now I'm going to go kill you. And he killed them, thigh, here's the words. He went and he killed them, 1 second. Calf over thigh. That's what the Tanakh says. He went, he smote them, calf over thigh, a great blow. What does calf over thigh mean? They put in the text. Either when you run so fast, like your calf is over you, you're running, he killed them, they were fleeing in all directions. The Plishtim were running everywhere, they were so afraid of him. Or calf over thigh can mean the cavalry that are riding on top of horses. When you have a soldier on top of a horse, his calf over thigh. His legs are on top of the animal. It means a hint, he didn't just kill regular Plishtim. He killed soldiers that came to kill him. On top of horses, he killed the horse and the riders and everyone. He killed them all. And that's how scared the Plishtim came, because this guy was ferocious. He was able to make all of the Plishtim run away, calf over thigh, to flee, run for their lives, or even the cavalry that were riding on top of the horses, he killed them too. So now the Plishtim come, what do? They encamp against the territory of Yehuda. That's where he was. He went after this, he went to a mountaintop, to a cleft in the rock, in the territory of Yehuda. And a large Plishtim army, a Philistine army, comes up against the tribe of Yehuda. And the men of Yehuda say to this Plishtim army, why have you come up against us? Well, we didn't do anything to you. Right? Exactly what Shimshon was afraid of. Shimshon was afraid that they would attack the Yehuda. So Yehuda said, we didn't do anything. So you're right, you didn't. You guys are already good servants, you're behaving, we have no problems with you. All we want is Shimshon. Give us Shimshon, bind him, give him to us, and we leave you all alone. See, he did an excellent job of making this about him personally, like the snake. Like the snake, the prophecy of Jacob was so on target. So the 3,000 men of Judah go up to the mountain, to the cave where Shimshon is. And they come and they say to Shimshon, what are you doing? Why are you making problems against us? The Plishtim are our masters. Even the Jews were afraid of the Plishtim. Even the Jews think that Shimshon is doing something on his own, not realizing he's acting on behalf of God. His parents didn't know. The verse said that we read before, his parents didn't know that this all came from God. And he used the whole pretext of the honey and the lion, all that was all a pretext that was clearly to him from the Spirit of God resting upon him. And God is giving him supernatural strength for all of this. But the other Jews don't realize this. No one realizes this. Shimshon's very humble. He's not telling anyone his real objective. So Shimshon says to them, okay, promise me that you won't kill me and I'll let you tie me up. I'll let you take me prisoner as long as you promise that you won't lay your hands upon me. Deliver me alive to the Plishtim. They're happy with it. They don't want to kill their own brother. They tie him up. They put him onto a big bed or whatever, tied hands and feet. They bring him, they carry him to the Plishtim. The Plishtim see he's coming, and they're so excited that it says in this verse that a large cry comes up from the people. Right here? That's much later. Okay, there's a huge cry, and the people are so excited. They're so excited to see he's coming, our prisoner, and they start a great battle cry. At that moment, you know what happens? At that moment, when Shimshon hears a cry of the people, verse 14, if you see it on your page, verse 14, chapter 15, as he came to Lehi, the Philistines shouted towards him, and there rested upon him a spirit of the Lord. Over and over again, you find these words. There was a spirit of the Lord upon him, and the ropes that were upon his arms became as flax that was burnt with fire, and his bonds melted off his hands. It wasn't like he needed to untie himself or use and break his hands free. In a second, like when you put flax to fire, what happens when you put flax in front of fire? It just melts away. The ropes just fell right off his hands. Now he wants to kill them. He has nothing in his, he has no weapons. So he found a moist jawbone of a donkey and put forth his hand and took it and killed with it 1,000 men. He killed 1,000 men with the jawbone of a donkey. And then Samson said, with the jawbone of a donkey, I heaped them up. With the jawbone of a donkey, I've killed 1,000 men. So let me tell you about this jawbone of a donkey, and I'll tell you what happens next. So this is amazing stuff, by the way. There's so many fascinating things here. First of all, the Medrash says, you know where this jawbone of a donkey came from? Which donkey do we know about? Which donkey do we know about has a jawbone? The talking donkey of Bilam. That's a jawbone we know about because that donkey talked a lot. Now, how big is the jawbone of a donkey? Small. I mean, it's a jawbone. It's not a leg. The leg of an animal is like a bat, or it's a little. How big is a jawbone? Size of your fist. I'm saying, how big is it? Not only that, it says it was moist. It was moist. God kept it moist from all the years before from Bilam. Some say it was a regular donkey that just happened to die. They saw a bone on the ground. Either way, he took it, and the animal that got close to him, like you see, like in the movies, like anyone gets close, like whatever, like you beat them all up. It was like a super movie, like a superhero movie. It was for real. Piles of dead soldiers. Piles. He starts to praise and say, look, with a jawbone of a donkey, I heaped mounds upon mounds of people. He's praising. And then you know what happens to him at that moment? At that moment, he suddenly gets weak. Suddenly, his mouth goes dry. He gets dehydrated, and he feels like he's about to collapse and faint from exhaustion. It's not easy to kill 1,000 people, you know what I'm saying? He used a lot of energy. His adrenaline was going high. And now at that moment, he feels weak. There's no energy. And at that moment, he falls on the floor. And he prays to God. And what does he say to God? Verse number 18, he became very thirsty, and he calls to the Lord, and he said, you have given through the hand of your servant this great deliverance. And now shall I die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised? And then God did a miracle, and the jawbone, the mouth of the jawbone opened up, and water, I forgot to put the verse, I thought I put the verse there, but I guess I didn't. It's a mistake. A miracle happened, the jawbone, the mouth, the bone opened up, and water came out, and he had what to drink. He had what to drink. You understand? What happened here in this story? Shimshon made a big mistake. Why did he almost die? If he would have fainted and passed out, what would have happened? The uncircumcised person would have come and captured him and killed him. So he prays to God. But notice what happens. Verse 16 was he forgot to praise God. And for a moment he said, with the jawbone of a donkey, I heaped them up. With the jawbone of a donkey, I have killed 1,000 men. And immediately upon saying that, he gets weak. And immediately upon getting weak, he recognizes, I made a big mistake. I forgot to recognize that my power is not from me, my power is from God. At that moment in verse 18, he says to God, you have given through the hand of your servant this great deliverance. This is not, I killed 1,000 men. Verse 18, he says, you have given through the hand of your servant this great deliverance. And now shall I die of thirst and fall in the hands of the uncircumcised? God, it's all about you. Don't let the uncircumcised have power over your agent. And that's when God does a miracle, and God gives him water from the mouth of the donkey. Understand? It's a fascinating story. It's the only moment, if anything, this is the greatest mistake that Shimshon makes. We'll talk about the mistake of Delilah and all that. Maybe we'll have to do another class next week. I see where it's. Well, to get to that story, this is the mistake that Shimshon makes. There was a moment that he let it get to his head. There was a moment when he said, look at me. I killed 1,000 police soldiers. I piled them up in heaps. And immediately he says, ooh, I made a mistake. God, I'm nothing. You have given through the hand of your servant this great deliverance. It's all you. It's all you. So here I'm going to jump now to the end of what I wanted to talk about, and next week I think we'll continue. You want to know the power of Shimshon? How we all could be Shimshon? We're going to see this more next week as well, but we already saw it very clearly. You know why Shimshon was so powerful? Because he recognized that everything he had is from God. He recognized that everything he had is from God. There was nothing that Shimshon had that he said, for a moment he did, but then he realized right away. He realized, I have nothing on my own. Everything I did, it's what you have done through the hand of your servants. The way to be a vehicle of power is by not getting in the way of the power. Chassidim will sometimes give a blessing. We shouldn't get in the way of what the Rebbe wants to do through us. God wants to give you a blessing. We shouldn't get in the way. We shouldn't let our own egos, our own intellect, our own mind get in the way of the blessings. The secret of Shimshon, I forgot how to talk about his name, but the secret of Shimshon is that he recognized that all of his power comes from God. We're going to see more. We'll talk about this next week when the cut is here. It's clear to him. Why do I have power? Because God gave me power. And the moment he loses his holiness, he loses his power. He knows that.
But the teacher was his mother.
Who said the teacher was his mother? Who said his teacher was his mother?
When he was growing up, his mother fed him only the good, and the honey, like they say, me'az yetzah matok,
Yeah.
And when he grew up, this folk was,
Okay, that's fine.
He fell in love with the shiksa.
We're going to get to that story next week. We're going to get to that story. I wanted to talk about now. I wasn't going to spend so much time on it. But really, when I was preparing today, I was thinking, really, Delilah is quite an interesting character. Not a good story, Delilah. Maybe we'll talk about Delilah more next week, because now that I'm going to have to make a whole class out of it, so I'm going to talk more about Delilah. She's not with my whatever. We'll talk about Delilah next week. I don't know if I'll frame the class around Delilah, if I'll frame it around, we'll see. I have a whole week to plan, to think, to prepare. I'll think about it all week. But here's my closing message to you, my friends. Shimshon was given divine strength, absolutely. Me and you are not supermen, and we don't have flying powers, and we can't kill 1,000 Plishti enemies with our bare hands, although that'll be amazing. But his power didn't come because he was 6'10" with his power came because he recognizes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, from God Almighty, and he always knew that. Every moment of his greatness, he felt the Spirit of God upon him, and that's when he acted. And the one moment when he forgot that was the one moment when he became weak. When he felt so faint, he says he couldn't even lift his hand to get water. He was holding the jawbone in his hand. If there would have been, the Medrash says, if there would have been a pitcher down the floor, he wouldn't be able to lift it. God had to make that the bone he was holding in his hand opened up to give him water to drink. That was the moment of his weakness. Not the enemy. It was the moment that he thought that I have done something great. The moment he began to think greatness within himself was the moment he became weak. As long as he felt it from God, was the moment he stayed strong. Yes.
But you were telling the story from the middle, you're going back, right? Then he was a child,
I'm saying the whole story. I started from the beginning.
Yeah, now you're going back to the beginning. Because before you said when he killed all the thousands of people and he was dead, he died with them, right? So now you're going back.
I only mentioned the ending because that was a prophecy of Jacob. But I'm sure. Why are we talking about Shimshon this week? Out of saying mitamol with Shimshon, where does Shimshon come from? So happens to be I'm learning about him every morning, so he's really on my mind. But it's also in this week's Torah reading. There's a clear prophecy in this week's Torah reading about the end of Shimshon's life. And because there's a prophecy in this week's Torah reading about the end of Shimshon's life, that's why I'm giving a class on Shimshon. So I started by telling you about the prophecy and how the prophecy would come true. But then there's an amazing character here. A character that I'm sorry to say is so deeply misunderstood by the average American Jew or non-Jew who just thinks of him as a Jewish Goliath, a Jewish superhero with super strength. Shimshon was a holy man. He was a judge. He was a rabbi. He was a scholar. He was a Nazarite. He was a holy man who hid his holiness in a way where people should think that he's doing things to be able to get personal vengeance against the Plishtim without anyone ever blaming the Jewish people or endangering the Jewish people. Understand? Yes. Good night to everyone. I enjoyed it. I'm glad everyone watching enjoyed. Jessica and Art and Heidi. Thank you. Thank you, Carmen and Stephanie and Orly. Yes.
The problem with Samson is he shouldn't have told this woman where the sling came. You should never tell your wife or your girlfriend everything.
Good. So you're going to come back next week, and next week we're going to talk about the story of Shimshon and Delilah. I don't know how I'm going to teach a class.
She's listening.
Yeah. Did Shimshon make a mistake? Did he know what was going to happen? We're going to talk about it. So we're going to talk about this story in more depth. And by the way, it's a sad story.
Until now, we're fighting the Palestinians.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you all. I hope you all enjoyed. Next week, same time, same place. Thank you, Heidi. Laila Tov. God bless you. Thank you, Jessica. I'm glad you enjoyed. Better than the movie, yeah? The original. So they say the book is better than the movie. The book is better.